Jim Palmer, you're back, and there's good news and bad news. The good news is you're here, so welcome. Thanks for joining me. And the bad news is we have a vulnerability that's running wild. So thank you for joining. I know you've been working a ton on this, and so that's very much appreciated, not only by us but by the industry as a whole. Can you tell me a little bit about this? What is this vulnerability that's going on?
Sure. So this is a brand new vulnerability, and it's actually more than one. And it's contained in a report called FragAttacks. It was published by Maddie Van Hoof from New York University, Abu Dhabi. So Maddie should be a name that a lot of Wi-Fi professionals recognize. He was the lead author in the Crack report from October of 2017. So I think most of us remember Crack, and also Dragon Blood from April of 2019. And this last report, which is called FragAttacks, deals with is continued work in Wi-Fi, really. And while the previous two efforts covered the encryption and cryptography that's used in Wi-Fi, this report is more focused on how Wi-Fi devices receive, store, and then process fragmented data that comes in over the air. So in total, there's actually 12 CVEs, and CVE stands for Common Vulnerabilities and Exposures. And there's 12 of them that have been assigned for this report to deal with Wi-Fi. And some of these go back actually quite a ways. There's speculation that some of these have been around since Wi-Fi was introduced in 1997, and it's just now coming to light now.
Wow. Okay, so is there an immediate concern for the safety and security of our data that we transmit over Wi-Fi networks?
So there's not. And this is the big difference in this attack, or this report, and all these attacks compared to the previous ones. Nothing in this is about the encryption in Wi-Fi or the cryptography behind it. Crack and Dragon Blood is about the cryptography and the encryption and how the keys are done and breaking those keys and doing that stuff. If I had to guess, and this is just my personal opinion, some of these vulnerabilities were found as they were trying to kind of work around this inability to actually crack that encryption. Malicious actors like to be able to decrypt things on the fly and be like, oh yeah, your encryption doesn't matter. I can decrypt it and I can get that data and get that information immediately. And this isn't that. And so I think what happened is when they were like, hey, how do we try to break the cryptography again? They went, we can't. So maybe there's a different way. If you build a strong enough front door and somebody's like, yeah, we're not even going to try to bust down that front door, but let's see if we can find another way in, find another way. And I think that's where this report really came from and the origins behind it.
Okay, that makes sense. So that, I'm sure that makes me feel better, and other people listening as well are watching. So when we look at these, what can we do right now to at least prevent this?
So the unfortunate thing is because it deals with how the data is fragmented when you send data over the air. We can't just take a single video file like this video and just send it over the air as a single chunk. We have to break it down. And so it's fragmented and then transmitted and then aggregated. And these attacks and these vulnerabilities are about how that process happens and how the devices handle it and how the devices do this. And because it really goes back to how Wi-Fi was designed way back in the 90s, the only true fix for this is to patch the devices, and you need to patch all the devices, not just APs, but client devices as well. Some of the attacks in here are actually targeting the client device themselves, where it doesn't matter what your APs are doing. It doesn't matter anything that happens with the APs. These are attacks where an attacker can craft malicious frames and change things in them, say, hey, it's a data packet, but we're going to call you a broadcast packet. We're going to call you something else. And we're just going to send it to a laptop or a phone or a tablet, what have you, and trick that device into saying, oh, I'm going to receive this anyway, even though I don't know who you are. I don't know who sent it to you. And I don't know why you sent it to me, but I'm still going to receive it. And then I'm just going to do whatever it is you tell me to do. And so it's actually kind of scary. So the only way to fix this is to patch it. You have to get patches from, the vendors of not only the APs, but also your client devices. And so that's really the only way to prevent this or try to stop this. But that being said, these are really complicated attacks. Some of them are multi-part. The ones I refer to is just a single, hey, I'm going to send you data. There's others that are 2, and some of these are even 3-step attacks where you have step 1, step 2, step 3, and it's complicated. You have to be very close to the person. There's a man in the middle component. So there's all these different moving parts that have to line up specifically to make these attacks work. So even though they're scary, they're also very complicated to carry out in the wild. And so I don't imagine a huge rash of it. So while it's scary because of what it can happen and really it goes at the heart of Wi-Fi, it's also, I don't think, something we're going to see. There's not going to be a bunch of hackers going out this afternoon or tomorrow, and all of a sudden, stealing everybody's data. So there's still a lot of moving parts, but yeah, the end of the day, we're going to have to patch everything.
So one of the things that's always a little bit unnerving is when you find vulnerabilities like this, the industry has to catch up and create patches for it, right? So as we wait for vendors as a whole to have everything patched and those patches available, what can we do in the meantime?
So I'm actually glad you mentioned the thing about having, getting all these patches out, because there really is a lot. And because it's not just something that deals with, say, Dragon Blood, where it was just around WPA3, because it's Wi-Fi in general, it affects all generations of Wi-Fi. So there's lots of moving parts in here. There's lots of different things. And so there's just been a ton of work, like you alluded at the beginning, behind the scenes in order to get these patches out. So I know they're coming. There's going to be some that are going to be posted a lot sooner than others. So in the meantime, while we're waiting on this, there's some things that people can do. And it's interesting because the researchers, Matty Van Hoof and his team, actually point to this, where they say that there's some current standards that exist today that would help prevent some of these attacks and mitigate these things, except they're not used today, at least not widely. They're there, but we're not using them. Some of those things are like 802.11w, which is protected management frames, which is the ability of sort of after the device, when the device starts talking to the AP and they're passing traffic, attackers like to come in and they like to try to bump you off, and they attack those management frames. And 11W, what that does is it actually protects those to where you can't kick a device off. Once I'm associated to my AP in my enterprise, my work or wherever I'm at, then that protects that attacker from knocking me off, and they can't do that anymore. Another thing that you can look at is looking at enterprise-grade security. As Wi-Fi has evolved and we've gone on, it used to be, it was WEP, and then WEP got cracked, so then we went, WPA2, and WPA for a minute, and then WPA2, and it was personal, and we had pre-shared keys, and everything was great. But as we've evolved, and as attackers and researchers have gotten better at this, we've started to realize that some of these things, just a standard password doesn't really cut it anymore. We need to have something else. And using enterprise security that uses different EAP types that do what's called mutual authentication, where the AP authenticates the device, but also the device authenticates the AP and says, hey, is this really the AP that I want to join, or is it something else? And so doing some of these things like that helps secure our networks. Now, the problem with that is they take a long time to build. They're complex, and more importantly, not all devices even support it. So it's not like you can just go into your controllers and just say, hey, I'm going to turn on 11W, I'm going to turn on EAP TLS and WPA3 Enterprise, and I'm going to secure the whole thing. I'm going to lock it all down, because what's going to happen is about half to 75% of your devices are going to fall off because they don't support it. So the reason why these, the researchers point to it and say, hey, this stuff exists, but we're still able to attack because nobody's using it. Well, the reason why nobody's using it is because the devices don't support it. So there's that thing. In the meantime, there is another step that, at least for a Ruckus customer, is a very easy thing to look at. And that's turning on WIDS and WIPs. That's wireless intrusion detection system and wireless intrusion prevention system. And that's actually something that's included in Ruckus products. And what that can do is that helps us know and understand if there's a man-in-the-middle attack happening in our environments. And for the majority of these attacks that are outlined in this report and all the CVEs, the majority of them require a man in the middle it requires that person to be spoofing your network and saying, hey, this is who I am. And a Ruckus Wids and Whips can actually, that's one of the things that it's really good at protecting against is, hey, there's somebody doing some bad things in my environment. And for me, I tell people, don't just turn it on to where it goes and attacks people, because attacking is really kind of a dangerous thing, but at least alert. That way, if there's a problem in your network, you know about it and you can go and take care of it before it becomes a bigger problem. Yeah. The last thing I want to talk about too is within this attack or vulnerabilities and all these reports, there's a social engineering aspect in it as well. So some of the more damaging attacks actually requires a man in the middle and a social engineering aspect of the, you got to have that person click on a malicious link, hey, I'm going to send you, and we all get the phishing, email trainings, and saying, hey, this is a phishing email. And that's actually part of these attacks is, you need the person you're attacking to click on these links so that your device goes and loads a specifically length URL. It's got to be crazy long or something. And so there's other things. And so having a good security standpoint of where you're doing social engineering training, so you're not falling for these phishing and vishing and all these other type of attacks, plus a man in the middle of knowing, hey, what's happening in my environment, can really help you while you then take that next step of, looking to upgrade your WLANs, your network configurations, to where we say, hey, you know what, we're going to take that step that we need to take to secure our data, because I hate to tell people, but these attacks are not going away. They're only going to get worse, and they're just going to get more of them.
Just as much as we love to build networks, there are people out there that like to break them. So
yes.
and you put it excuse me, you put it really well. You can implement these things that help. Let's say, and you heard it from an industry expert here, don't just turn them on. Do some planning, careful, thoughtful process that goes into it. Let's say we've been in the planning phase of doing that and we're ready to implement them. If we turn everything on now, do we still have to worry about this?
Again, you still have to attack it, or you still have to patch it, because these attacks, some of them are not necessarily, it's not about that communication between the client and the AP and how that all works that we normally associate with these attacks, especially with Crack and Dragonblood. It's not just about that. It's about how our Wi-Fi devices receives, stores, and processes this data, because, I know it's weird, to have a Wi-Fi conversation and have to explain the fact that, hey, you know what? Not all of our data gets from device A to device B and we call those stations or stays, STAs. They don't always get in the right order, and because of multipath and because of all this, error that we don't really control and it's not licensed. And so it's sort of this weird thing of there's this Wi-Fi is very unique in that. And so we have to patch. You still have to patch, because, securing our data and securing our networks these days is not just about that one thing. And in security, terms, they call it a castle and a moat scenario, where you build this very, very strong outside wall to protect yourself, but you don't build anything on the inside. And security people for years have said that's just not a good way to do business anymore, because once you breach that moat, once you get over that one little obstacle, and I can't tell you how many movies I've watched where, once they breach that exterior wall, then the floodgates are opened and everything's out the window and everything goes bad. And that's just not how we need to design our networks today. Is we need to be doing multiple things in multiple different places, because all it takes is that one little thing that prevents these attacks from happening. And it might sound really stupid as, oh, well, of course you should do that. But that one little thing that you do could be that one thing that prevents the wall from crashing down and the floodgates opening.
Jim, this is a ton of information packed into a really small package, and I know there's much, much more. Are there resources out there that people can go look at that will help give them a more in-depth view of this?
There is, and the best place to find all this stuff is to go to CommScope.com, our main webpage, and there's a little banner there that you can click on, and you can get to some blog posts. You can get to the support site to find patches, and you can also get to some knowledge articles and some more in-depth write-ups that we've been able to put together, in preparation for this. Because I got to give credit to Matthew and the team. because they disclose this in a proper way. They've done some amazing detailed analysis work here. I mean, this is some really next level stuff. I got to give them a lot of credit because they then took the responsible approach of disclosing it to give us time to prepare, to give us time to build these resources. So the best place is to go to CommScope.com, click on the banner that you'll see, and you can get to all these other resources to learn more about this and how we can help.
Jim, I know there's a lot of people involved in this, and I know there's been a lot of man hours put into it. And so just your willingness to get this information out there is very much appreciated. So thank you for everything you do and all the effort you've put into this. Thank you.
Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. All right. Take care, everybody.
All right, bye.